So I reviewed a Christmas-themed Muppet movie, I reviewed a Christmas-themed action movie. Why not a Christmas-themed monster movie? Monster movies are one of my biggest interests, and hey, Gremlins is that movie. Let's talk about Gremlins. Gremlins came out in 1984 and is directed by Joe Dante. The movie takes place around Christmas and tells the story of this kid named Billy, played by Zach Galligan, whose father comes back from China with this exotic pet called a mogwai. So the mogwai ends up being named Gizmo and is probably the most adorable thing that you'll see in this movie, but there are also 3 rules that you have to follow when taking care of a mogwai. 1, don't get them wet. 2, don't get them out in the light, and 3, don't feed them after midnight. I'll elaborate more on that later. Unfortunately, most of these rules end up being broken because Gizmo accidentally gets wet, which spawns other mogwai. The mogwai raid the kitchen and start eating after midnight, and they turn into gremlins that decide to destroy the town just because they're gremlins. They're just little monsters that want to cause chaos. So the first time I actually saw Gremlins was during Halloween. I heard it was a horror comedy and I thought, okay, I'll watch it. I'm in the mood for some horror comedies. I saw Evil Dead 2 and I saw Gremlins the same year. I was just in a horror comedy mood at the time. And watching it, it really left an impression as more of a Christmas movie than a horror movie per se, because it's very goofy. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It almost acts like a Warner Brothers cartoon at points. And a lot of that does have to do with the film's tone and just the way the Gremlins act in general. The tone of the movie has a very zany, as I mentioned, Looney Tunes attitude. The Gremlins are insane, they cause all kinds of chaos and madness, and they love every second they cause chaos. And sometimes just being too zany and over the top might take you out of a movie, especially one that starts out as simple and Christmas-oriented as this, but that zany attitude adds to the film's charm. You love seeing all these little gremlins just cause chaos, and what's even more impressive is that all the gremlins are real. They are all real animatronics performing in front of the camera, doing breakdancing, drinking beer, singing. It's incredible. And there are 2 scenes in particular that really show that, okay, this is a really over-the-top kind of movie that you're not supposed to take 100% seriously. And that's the bar scene where Phoebe Cates helps run this bar as a waitress. And what's great about it is that all these gremlins are doing the most insane things possible, yet she is acting as professional as can be, serving them all drinks, giving them all peanuts, any kind of food that they need, while trying to dodge beer bottles being thrown at her, trying to dodge bullets being shot at her. It's total madness. And then there's the scene in the movie theater where the gremlins watch Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, sing along, smoke, eat popcorn. Again, it's total madness, and it all has to do with the fact that it's all real. It's all in front of the camera, and this is really a movie where you root for the monsters to cause all kinds of chaos. That being said, you still really care about the human characters and little Gizmo. The main character of this movie is Billy, who's played by Zach Galligan, and if I had to point one weak spot in this movie, it might be him. Out of all the actors, he's probably the weakest of the bunch, but Billy as a character is still pretty charming. There are points where he is a complete idiot. At the same time, he's not an idiot to where he screws things up in terms of trying to stop the gremlins. It's just more like a, "Aw, you're so dumb." It's almost kind of cute how dumb he is. But I will give Billy credit for one thing. Out of all the movies where teenagers are kind of the main characters, he's the only one that I've seen who actually has the balls to ask his love interest out on a date pretty early into the movie. The love interest here is Phoebe Cates, who, thanks to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, was like the hottest girl back in the 80s in terms of film actresses. She's really good here. I've always been in love with Phoebe Cates. But she also has probably the weirdest part of the movie, and that's the monologue that comes out of nowhere on how she stopped believing in Santa Claus, why she doesn't believe in Christmas. It takes place near the end of the movie. I won't say it comes completely out of nowhere because early on they do establish that she's just not the biggest fan of Christmas. But she goes on to tell this story about how her dad was trying to dress up as Santa Claus, went down the chimney, and then he got stuck broke his neck, and as the fire was being lit in the fireplace, they could smell something burning. So the fire department ended up getting the dead father out of the chimney, and that was the point where she didn't believe in Santa anymore. And when you listen to this monologue, two things pop into your mind. The first one is the obvious one. How did this dark of a monologue get into a movie with a bunch of chaotic little gremlins that want to destroy this town? It's a little jarring at points. At the same time, the second thought that goes through my mind when hearing this monologue is just sympathy. You feel very sad for Phoebe Cates when you listen to this monologue, and she does a fantastic job of delivering it. And then, of course, you got little Gizmo. Gizmo is just completely adorable. You love him. He has so many different expressions, although there are points where the animatronics are clearly animatronics, so they act in a very unnatural way. But at the same time, that unnaturally funny way adds to the film's tone. And the one thing I gotta say, this is a violent, violent movie. I imagine when this movie came out, it was pitched as a kid's movie, because it has that same attitude, but you have gremlins melting in the sunlight, you have a mother stabbing a gremlin repeatedly with a knife, throwing a gremlin into a blender, throwing it into a microwave and seeing it explode, you have people getting killed left and right. It's a very intense movie. And a little fun fact, this movie came out the same year as Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, both of which Spielberg was involved in, and because both this and Temple of Doom were pushing an R rating, Spielberg decided, you know what, let's make a rating that's in between PG and R, and thus the PG-13 rating was born. And I believe Red Dawn, the original Red Dawn, was the first movie to receive a PG-13 rating. Now, if I had one last thing I want to address, it's the 3 rules, especially the infamous don't feed them after midnight. Everyone's debated about these rules and what they actually mean. I've given up at this point. I just don't think about it because I feel like if I start thinking about how the don't feed them after midnight rule works, I'm just going to be falling down an endless rabbit hole where I'm never going to crawl out. So I'm just leaving it at that. But yeah, the rules are stupid, especially the don't feed them after midnight rule. That is the dumbest of all. But on the whole, I love Gremlins. If you've followed my channel for quite some time, you know I love monster movies. And Gremlins is a perfect Christmas-themed monster movie. It has quite a few tropes that you would see with these older style monster movies, like the 50s B movies. But it has a few unique twists and turns to make it somewhat fresh and new. I love all the characters, I love the animatronics, and I just love the overall zany tone, and I love that it gives you a Christmas feeling, even if it goes to some very dark and sadistic places. So I would say, despite my complaints, and they're very minor complaints, get off your ass and go see this right now. I absolutely love Gremlins. It's one of my favorite movies out there. And just like Die Hard, it's one of those movies that you wouldn't think is Christmas themed, but when you watch it, you go, yeah, I could see myself watching this on Christmas every year. So yeah, I love Gremlins. And that's my review for Gremlins. The last 2 reviews in this series are going to be more traditional Christmas movies, so stay tuned tomorrow and Friday. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on Gremlins, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.